some of you, I'm going to assume no prior knowledge whatsoever of TouchStore so that everyone will get the same level of training. So when you arrive in and someone is using TouchStore, this is a screen that you'll probably be most familiar with. It is the home screen. So once you double click on your TouchStore application, it will bring you to this screen. We do keep some basic information here. I won't go into it too much. This is your online backups, any support tickets you have open with us, our contacting information, opening hours, and then your service level agreements will all be down here as well. But the main button you will be concerned with here is the Start button on the left-hand side. So if I press that, it's going to bring you to a blank patient's file. So to search for a patient, it's very similar between all three systems. So as long as your cursor is flashing up here at the top, you can start searching for a patient. So it'll be your surname, comma, first name. You don't have to type out the full name. So for example, I have a TouchStore test patient there. So if I just do TO, comma, test, it'll bring them up there. If you have multiples, you can use your mouse or you can use the up and down arrows on your keyboard and it'll jump between the different patients. Pressing enter on them then will go into the patient. But for this, I'm just going to give you a new patient. So if you're looking at the prescription and you know yourself that they're new, they've never been in before, there's two ways that you can do that. You can either type out the name. So if I look for myself, now I actually am a patient in here, but I'll just type in Joe there, for example. There is no patient showing, meaning that as soon as I press enter, it's going to ask me, do I want to create the new patient? But just for this, I'm going to say no, because you probably would have noticed a symbol popping up there, and it's the percent sign. Percent sign is our wildcard, and it comes up if it can't find anything that you're searching for. It'll also pop up for things like surnames. So for example, if you put an O, it assumes that there is an apostrophe, expecting an apostrophe or a space. The reason why we put the percent in there is because you could have several people in the pharmacy creating patients with an apostrophe, with a space, or with a comma, or anything. So the percent sign covers them all. And you'll notice it pop up for if I try McCarthy as well, it'll come up just to cover them all. For this example, I'm just going to create a patient that I know isn't in the system. My percent sign's after popping up just to make sure that I haven't misspelt it or anything. So it'll cover absolutely everybody. And I'm going to press enter. And this will give me the option to create a new patient. Now, the search up here on the top is only used for names, so it's a quick search. Whereas if I wanted to search for things like the patient's card number or their address, we give you an advanced search option here down in the bottom left. Now, you'll notice as well that we have F2 up here in the top, and that's just if you prefer to use the keyboard, you can, or if you prefer to jump between the mouse and the keyboard, you also can do that as well. But F2 up here just lets you know that if the cursor isn't up here, if you press it, it'll fly up there rather than you having to click on it. If you ever press F2 twice accidentally, it just brings up an advanced search screen because it assumes that you can't find them in the basic search. And it's the exact same as clicking on this button down here. So by default, it'll bring you into all patients, but you do have a couple of handy filters in here. So it'll show you the last 10 patients that you've dispensed to. So if you can't for the life you remember who just came in, you can select last 10 and it'll show you the last 10 patients you had open. You do have other filters here, which we do sort depending on what you require on the day of you taking in TouchStore. So some people may not need nursing homes, you may not need methadone, but they're there if you need them. But the two most commonly used one are all patients and last 10. If you're looking for something like a form number, you can search for it here, which is handy when it comes to your claim, or if you're looking for a patient reference number. A very handy one as well is if you dispensed a controlled drug in the morning, for example, and you can't remember for the life of you who it went to, I can click on my product dispensed. I can type in my product. So let's say I'll just go with Humira. I think I have dispensed that one. I have. So if I was to put in a product there, I can then see the patients that have got that product and it'll list everyone. You can filter it down even further if you need to, but you shouldn't have to. And again, that was just in my search button down here. the second tab over, Advanced Search, and then Product Dispensed. The final tab is your multi-field search, and that's if you're looking for address, telephone number, and so on. But for this example, I'm just going to create a new patient. Now, if you look at the prescription yourself, you know they're a new patient. You don't have to type out the name to find out that they're new. We give you these quick buttons in the top right. And this one here with the plus icon next to it will allow you to create a new patient. So if I say yes to this, it'll bring up your patient maintenance screen. Now we're just going to read left to right here. So if I put in the first name, I'll just put in Joe, my surname, White. You can put in these other fields if you need to. What some people do is they will put in brackets here, like M3 or something like that, just to let them know where the prescription may be filed away. You can put that in there and it will show on the PMR. Date of birth if you need to, gender if you need to. And then this, so you can ignore the PX flag for now, I won't go into that, but the DS, if this is ever ticked, it just means that the patient is deceased. And if you actually hover over these things, it will tell you what it means. So I won't put in an address for this example, but you can put in an address here, your telephone numbers and so on. And then over to the right hand side. Now there's a lot of tabs here at the top. I'm not going to go into them in too much detail. The main one that you will be dealing with will be details, which is just your schemes and your doctors. So if I wanted to add a scheme to this patient's file, I just select it into the blank space and it's after creating a record for me. And then I can add in whichever scheme that they're using. So I'll just give them drug refund for now. And if I wanted to add an additional scheme, I just press insert scheme and it adds another row here. So let's say for this one, I'll give them GMS as well. All we require here then is a card number. You don't need to put in the month and the year for the expiry because as soon as I say OK here and the patient is created, provided the card number is correct, we will pull that information from the PCRS and tell you whether the card number is valid or not. And I will show you in a few seconds now where you can see that. So down here, the defaults is when I go into this patient's file, what scheme do I want it to default to? So I have picked drug refund, so let's say it could have been GMS, but now the GMS number, they've no longer got the medical card, so they're just drug refund. So you could switch this here so that there would be no mistakes made on the PMR. Your doctor, you can search by surname and first name, or you can search by code. So for example, if I put in 61559, I have a hospital showing there for myself. Or if I put in my local doctor, it's showing there as well. And enter there, we'll pick the doctor. These you can ignore, they're just for us. And I will go down. So once you're happy with all of this information, you can press OK in the bottom right, which will create the patient. If you are missing anything, like let's say you've picked a particular scheme that requires a PPS number, the system will stop you from creating it and will tell you you need to do this. Wherever the cursor lands after the error that pops up on the screen, that is where the problem is. So if I need a PPS number, the cursor would end up over here to let you know this is where you need to enter it. But if I'm happy with this, I can just say, okay. If I realize that they were already patient and I didn't need to create them, I could just cancel and it'll get rid of the work that I've done. You could delete the patient, but only if there's been no dispenses to them. You cannot delete a patient who has history attached to their file. And then you can also merge if you have two incorrect or one correct and one incorrect patient, you can merge them together. So if I say OK here, it has now created the patient. So you'll see in the top left, this is the information I had entered. I wouldn't need to enter the date of birth and the age because if the card number was valid for my GMS, it would pull that information in for me. But because I'm not linked to the PCRS at the moment, we unfortunately won't be able to see that today. But here on the left, if I did make a mistake with Joe's file, I could just click in this here, the edit button, or if you see in brackets F3, which is the short key for it, it brings me straight back into that screen I was in 2 minutes ago, and then I can adjust any information in here. To the right hand side then would be the defaults that I had selected prior. So Brendan Thornton, the doctor, the scheme that I wanted to be default was drug refund. If I had GMS, DPS or so on, so I'll switch to GMS here. The card number is here. And then Once you are linked to the PCRS, so all that requires is a claim cert, and unfortunately I don't have one on this PC, but you will see different color codes telling you the different status of the scheme. So green being everything's okay, there's nothing wrong with this GMS card number. Yellow meaning that there's more information on the PCRS side, whether it's been updated or whether the expiry has changed. If you actually double click on the scheme when it's yellow, it'll pull in that new information for you, so you don't need to go and manually change it. Red then means that there's something wrong, and will give you a detailed message here as to what is wrong with it, whether it's expired or whether it can't find the patient's details on the portal. And then the other color you will see, and you will only see this for GMS, is purple, and that is a GP visit card, but it'll actually pop up on the screen and tell you this is a doctor visit card only. So then on the right hand side you have notes. These just sit there, so you can type in whatever you want. You don't need to press save or anything, and they stay there. So if you had patient prefers to take a certain brand, or patient has agreed to pay the supplement or something along those lines, you could leave in here. But if it's something that you need to pop up on the screen and you need someone to actually read it, you can use warnings on the right hand side here. And that basically allows you to create a pop-up. So as soon as somebody goes into that patient's file, this warning will pop up on the screen with whatever you type in here. And I actually have a patient with one of these set up, which I'll jump to in a second, and you can see. So I'm going to just put through a prescription just to show you on a non-populated PMR. So if I want to put through a script here, I have my buttons down at the bottom. So we're just going to concern ourselves with these buttons here on the right for now. We have an edit button, which will allow you to edit your prescription and make changes to it if you need to adjust the quantity or change a drug. You can press new script, which will create a new script. Repeat, which will repeat the prescription that you've highlighted and let you have one more look at it before you say you're happy with it. And repeat and complete will repeat the prescription you've selected, assume that you are happy with everything, and just fly it off and give you the form number and the labels. So there's no double clicking or enter, it's just one click and then the prescription's done. And I'll show you an example of that in a few seconds. The next three buttons here, just your receipt, bag, and label. They're just if you need to reprint them. The reason why they're a darker color on my screen is because I don't have any printers attached. History, or the HIST button. We will show you the last year of dispensary data on the patient's file, just to keep things quick. So if you had a patient who's been with you for the last 4 or 5 years, we don't want to load all of that history every time you go in, because it would just make the system slow. But if you did want to see something past that year, you just press the history button and it shows you absolutely everything that they've been on. Your view scan, which unfortunately, I don't have a scanner attached, but this is how you would scan a prescription to a file. And view would just allow you to look at the prescription if you needed to check the dosage code or you needed to check any notes against the file. You could press view, and it'll allow you to look at the prescription without having to edit it and then complete it or edit and repeat it to see what is going on with it. You can just press your view and it'll show you everything you need to know about the prescription. But for this, I'll just put through a new script. And if you see down the bottom here, I don't know how hard it is to see now on your screens, but there are lines underneath each of these letters. A line under the P, there's a line under the E here, and for new script, there's a line underneath the I. That basically means that Alt and that letter will do that function. So for example, if I press new script, it brings me to my new prescription screen. Whereas if I press Alt and I on my keyboard, it does the exact same thing. So it's just personal preference. Usually when we're training on site, we will push the keyboard a bit more because it is faster in the long run. It does take a bit longer to get used to, but it is quicker. So I'll just go back there now. So I'm going to go to new script, and it brings me straight to my drug to enter. So by default, it brings me to a recently dispensed list, again, to keep things quick so it's not loading the full IPU file every time you type out a product. So for example, if I type in warfarin, you can see that it's bringing up the most commonly dispensed warfarin that I use. But let's say I need a ULM version that I haven't dispensed often. You'll actually see a message here, can't find a product, hit F8, and it'll jump to active products. And you'll see active products here. So if I press F8, The dot has now moved over, and now if I type in morphine, there's a few more showing. And these are just ones that I haven't dispensed in the last 6 months or so. But for this example, I'm just going to use the recently dispensed list. Morphine. You can then press tab or enter, or you can click it. It's really up to yourself. I think depending on what system you'd be coming from, or you could use enter or tab. I think on Helix it's tab and MPS it's enter, but you can do either or on ours. So enter, and it jumps down to my dispensed quantity. So it'll assume that it's 1 pack. You can do 1p, 2p if you want, and it'll assume that it's 1 pack and 2 pack, or you can just enter in your quantity here if you need to. But for this example, I'll just go with a full pack. So I can then enter. So I'm saying that I'm dispensing 100. The doctor has written 100 on the prescription. There's nothing owed. And the owed column here is calculated based off of what difference is between these two. So for example, if I was only dispensing 50, but there was 100 on the prescription, it would then say there's 50 on owing. But I'll come back to that later. Your dosage codes then should all be the same. So for example, if I do MD as directed, but if there is ones yourself, I know the penicillin warning seems to change from pharmacy to pharmacy. So if you needed to add your own in, you just double click in here and it'll let you create your own dosage codes if you needed any particular ones. If it's something like eye drops and you have a queue out the door and you don't want to be creating them, distill 1 drop into left eye twice daily and you can't remember what it is, you can just click down here and start manually typing. Once you repeat this prescription, it will remember what you have manually typed. You won't have to keep doing it. But again, for this example, I'll just go with the basics. So at this point, I'm happy with what I've done. I'm happy with the drug, happy with my quantities, happy with the dosage. I can just press enter, which then is probably very hard to see for yourselves, but it has now highlighted my next key, meaning that as soon as I press enter one more time, it has moved the item to the top of the screen. It will then give you the label for the warfarin, and now it has cleared the screen and it's ready for the next item. So I can start typing away. So a screen that you'll see a good bit is your reference pricing screen, and I'm just going to show you that now because I am in under GM. If I go to atorvastatin, for example, this screen will pop up. I'm just going to move this down. What this is showing us is what is selected on the prescription. So I'm just saying brand generic here, but if you did want to say that the doctor has written do not substitute, you can select it from the drop down here, the 2 most common ones. The main difference you will notice is if I pick brand generic prescribed, I have the option to say that the patient is going to pay the supplement. If I tick this, it will show me what the supplement amount due is. And if I switch it to do not substitute, that option has now disappeared. And they're the main 2 differences between them. The reason why I have 2 lists is because if I didn't have the atorvastatin 10 Pinewood brand, I do have an Accord brand, a Roa brand, and I do have Lipitor here as well if I need them, if I didn't have atorvastatin 10 on the shelf. I could then go with my alternative list. So let's say I'm going to go with Lipitor. You can select the Lipitor, and you're going to go with the alternative option, which is your button down in the bottom left. Whereas if you are happy with what's here as your current product, you can go with Dispense Current, and it will pick your atorvastatin 10. Now, if you find that this screen is popping up the whole time for you and you're just picking the same brand time and time again and we're never going with Lipitor, we leave a remember my answer button up here. And if you tick that, it will not ask you again next month. Now, that does not mean that you can't change your mind at any point. It just means that for this patient, it won't keep asking you. And I'll show you if we change our mind how we get back in there. So for this example, I'm going to say that it's brand generic. The patient isn't going to pay the supplement amount, but I wanted to remember the answer because we're always going to go with these options. So I can then dispense the current product. And there's my drug interaction. It's just letting me know that it's going to interact with the warfarin I had already dispensed. You can print these, or if you press select, you can see more information, but I'm happy with it. I'm just going to close it. And then also you'll see if you have preferred brands, and you want them to pop up as you're dispensing, or you have other people that are coming in to cover for you, and you're trying to get rid of a certain brand before you're ordering in a new one, you can put alerts against products. Now I have set up an alert against the warfarin to just say this is the preferred brand if you are dispensing it. And you can just say, okay, it's just a note for yourself. It's not going to stop you dead in your tracks or anything. You can just continue on from it. Now, if I did decide that I want to change that to do not substitute written by the prescriber, we have a ref button down here for reference pricing, and that just brings you straight back in if you had ticked remember my answer. So it's not the end of the world if you tick it by accident. So then I'm just going to put in my dosage code, and I'm just going to say that I am happy with this prescription. I'm happy that I don't need to set it on loan. I'm happy with the scheme. It's not phased, not dispensed. Your maximum made and left here in the center are your repeats. So if I did want to put, let's say 3 repeats or 4 repeats against this, depending on what way you like to do this, there's no right or wrong way. You can start from 0, but the way we train on site, because it just looks a bit neater on the PMR, is if there was 6 repeats, we would do a maximum of 6, and we're doing 1 today. So there's 5 left. So that would look as 1-6 on the PMR. So then as you repeat, it'll go 2-6, 3-6, and so on. Then when you get to the end, it'll warn you when you repeat from a 6 from 6 to say the prescription has ended and to look for a new prescription. But I'm just going to say I'm happy with this. So if we say complete, or because the line is underneath, the M, Alt and M would do it for you, but I'm just going to press complete here, and that runs off your prescription. So those 2 items. Now you'll see it gives you your form number at the top of the screen. And then for GDPR purposes, we clear the screen because it assumes at this point you're away bagging the items. So if anyone was to come back here, all they know is Joe White is a patient here. They have no idea what I'm on. So to jump back to Joe White is F10, jumps back to your previous patient. And here is my script. So my 2 items, my warfarin and my atorvastatin, and there's my repeats under my repeats column, 1 of 6. So if I was to repeat that, and that's where these buttons come into it, repeat would bring me back into the screen we were just in, where I can review all of the like on loans, owings, the price and everything. But if you're happy with everything you see here, I don't need to review it. I'm happy that Brendan Thornton is the doctor. I'm happy with the quantities and the price. Repeat and complete just flies it off. You will get your warnings. And there we go. It's just done. GMS form number 3, F10 to jump back, and there's your new prescription. My atorvastatin, number 3. 2 of 6 and repeats, and it just flied off. Whereas if I press repeat, it would bring me back into that screen we were just in, so you can have a double check of everything, and then you'd have to press complete, whereas this assumes you're happy. Now if I needed to make a change, I could just press my edit button, and it brings you in here and you can make any adjustments that you need to, whether it's the price, or let's say I don't have a prescription for the patient, so you could just tick on loan. That'll then mark the prescription as on loan. Or if I needed to change it to an owing, I don't have any atorvastatin on the shelf, but the doctor said they need to give 28. Just while we're in here, you'll notice these 2 options that popped up next to the owed column. The euro symbol basically means, do you want to charge for the levy now, or do you want to charge them when they come back? Not ticked means I'm not going to charge them, and our system will assume that if this is 0, you don't want to charge them. But if I even put 1 tablet in here, it's going to assume I want to charge them because I'm physically handing them tablets. But again, you could untick it if you want, and then just get the full payment when they come back, and then 0 unticks it. Order then is, it's an owing. Do we need to order it? Ticking here will just put it on order for you. Depending on what orders or what way you are using your orders, usually people are on pack replacement, so everything you dispense goes onto a wants list anyway, so you should be okay. But I'm just going to complete that because I'm not going to make any changes to it other than the owing, and then I'll jump back here. Now, I'm just going to show you a more populated patient's file because there are different types of dispenses. So I'm just going to type the surname in the top, and then I'm going to pick TouchStore Test here. And you'll see I'm after getting an alert pop up here. and it says Sun has paid prescription. That is my warnings here on the right hand side for an example, and it's just to remind you, you have to actually press OK to come out of it. And if I see in here, there's the warning I had attached. So just so I know that they have paid, just in case I'm querying a non-chargeable balance on the labels, I can see there Sun paid prescription. So with this one, it's a bit more populated. You can see we have a couple of different colors here. So the green means that the prescription is owed. And you can see here the owed column is populated. So there's 28 owed here. If I wanted to run off that owing, all I do is repeat, and the system will ask you, do you want to dispense the owing or ignore it here. As soon as I press dispense owings, there's my pop-up again, it automatically assumes the quantities. Now you still can do a partial owing if you want to, and it'll just readjust the quantities, but it'll assume that you want to give the full owing back. And then I'm just going to complete it there. And you'll notice now in the bottom right hand corner of the screen, for that owing, there we go. There's my owing, atorvastatin, and it says owings dispensed on the 4th of the 2nd, 2022, and then what was dispensed, the quantity 28. So it'll always have a record, because if you notice the green is now gone, what information do we have to show that it's an owing? We have these notes in the bottom right. And if you need to know if something is written here, you'll have a tick box underneath your notes column here to show, yes, there is something here. Your yellow, and it says it in the bottom right, is a loan prescription. And another telltale sign that it's a loan prescription is the fact that there's no form number, and you won't get a form number until the prescription comes back in. Your pinks then is your not dispensed, and you'll see my high-tech scheme. So I've marked that as a not dispensed, and also my zero quantity is another telltale sign of that. If I wanted to repeat that, it's just going to ask me that it's a not dispensed. Do you wish to dispense it this month? I'm going to say no. Okay, I'm just going to come back. I'm just going to delete that one. Okay, and then the final one then is your phasing, which is this light blue color. And also you'll have a column here, phase, which is 4 of 4. And you'll also, for your notes, have what was the phased reason, usually request the physician. So what I'll do is I'll just show you how I'll put through a phase, but I'll just go through the filters really quickly. When you arrive on site, sometimes the PMR might look a little different. So at the moment, we're looking at this item by item, meaning that if I wanted to run off, let's say this prescription here, I can use my up and down arrows on the keyboard, or I can use my mouse if I'd like, up and down and enter on the items that I want. So I could take those two, I could take this here, and I could take this here if I wanted. And then enter again removes any ones that you've made an error on. And that's just up and down arrow and enter on the keyboard. If you see a patient's file and it looks like this, that just splits it up into prescriptions. Some places prefer this, some don't, but basically what this means is if I wanted to repeat, if this was a 10 item prescription, all I need to do is just click the form number once and it highlights all 10 items in the prescription, rather than you having to go down, enter, down, enter, down, enter the whole way down. And how I got in there was in the top left here, you have show RXs, which splits it into prescriptions, and show items, which splits it into items. Really, the reason why you jump between the two is if you have a regular patient that comes in, you could just go show RXs, one click on the form number, repeat and complete, the prescription flies off, you get your labels and your form number, and that's you done. Whereas if it's somebody that gets chopped and changed, you can do here show items and then just pick random items as you go. Now another filter that's very handy is your filter here, which is all dispenses at the moment, and it'll always be all dispenses when you come in here. But a handy one in here is your selected drug, which basically means that the drug you've highlighted in the background, I want to see how many times they've been on that, if a GP is requesting it, for example. So if we wanted to see how many times they've been on morphine 1 milligram, I select the drug, and instead of all dispenses, I pick selected drug. And there you go. That's how many times they've been on it. If it's something like Prolia, and you don't want to scroll through the last 6 months of dispense history to try and find it, from the dropdown, you can pick product name, and instead of clicking on it, you can just type it in here. Now I know myself this patient is on Prolia because the PMR is small, but if they've been with you for years, you can just type in Prolia in here and it'll show you if they're on it. Now while we're on the topic of Prolia, as you're dispensing, if a patient is on Prolia, as you're dispensing to them, it will give you a Prolia reminder label every time you complete a script for them, which will tell them when their next injection is due. Now you can turn that off for the patient if you find it annoying, or you can keep it on. It's really up to yourself, personal preference. So, okay, so what I'll do is I'll just go through a very quick the different types of dispenses you can do. So I'm just going to go new script or Alt and I. I'll just put through my warfarin interaction. Okay. And then dosage. So if I wanted to set something on loan, I can just tick on loan. Now I need to check this 1 second now. I'm just going to change myself to GMS. Just give me a bit more options. So if I click on loan, that is going to highlight it in yellow on the PMR, and it'll also not give it a form number. Once the patient comes back with a prescription, I can then repeat the script that I had marked as on loan, and it'll give it a form number then. If I wanted to phase something, phasing will assume that you're doing 4 phases. So additional phases mean you're doing one right now, how many more do you want? So if you were doing a daily, for example, you'd be doing 27 additional because there'd be 28 in total. And the system knows straight away then how to split it up. So you'd be getting daily phases for, let's say, methadone. But for this example, I'm just going to do a monthly. So 3 additional phases because I'm doing one right now, and it's going to split my dates up into 4 weeks. The reason usually request the physician, but there are others there if you need them. The start date, so this doesn't necessarily have to be the dispense date. It just needs to be the first phase date. So you could dispense it today, but pre-prepare it for next week. It'll then work the dates based off of what you've put in here, whether that be next Monday or a week from now. Repeats if you need to add repeats, and then dispense all phases now if you are pre-preparing. I won't tick that for this example, but I'll show you what it looks like if you do tick it. So let's say I'm happy with all of this. I can just say OK. And now in the right hand side, I have my phases. So I said the 4th was my first one. It then calculates 7 days apart from those because I said I wanted a 4-week split. And then my quantities are split also. If I had ticked dispense all phases now, the only difference would be it would look like this. And you would have no quantity owed. But for this example, I'm just going to do this. You can add your own dates in if you needed to add more. Let's say if one is landing on a Sunday and you just, or they're double dosing, you can also adjust the quantities. You could put half tablets in here as well if you'd like with 0.5. But the only thing we care about when it comes to phases is that this quantity down here, which is your 100, your total phase quantity, matches the prescribed quantity. If they match, we don't care how you get to the total quantity. You could do 27 here, you could do 24 here if you'd like, 23. It's really up to you as long as they all match. I'll just show you what that looks like on the PMR now. Also, if you did put in quantities that don't match, the system will tell you and warn you you have done something wrong. Go back and look at it. And if you see here now, there's my 1 of 4, and I have 75 remaining. If that patient came back in, I just repeat and complete, and it'll automatically mark 2 of 4. 2 of 4, 50 and 50. So we've got a few pop-ups there as we were dispensing. You will notice a couple of pop-ups appearing as you're going throughout the day, and the main reasons why are because the PCRS circular rules are built into the system. So if you see, for example, I have Viagra dispensed here, 4 tablets under GM. The rule being I can only dispense that once. So if I try and do a Viagra again under GM for this patient, the system should stop me. So if I go Viagra, let's go with the current brand. I'm going to complete that prescription. And there we go. So the pop-up on the screen is warning me that it's telling me I'm not allowed to dispense more than 4 times in 1 month. The buttons that appear here, now we don't want to stop you and just tell you this is the rule, tough. So we give you the option to say OK, which will let you continue on, but it's going to warn you again next time you dispense. Cancel will allow you to go back and fix the wrong that you've done. And allow product means that I don't want this popping up for this patient anymore because they have been approved. You'll see it around high-tech drugs and certain medication that maybe they are approved for this, and we'll just remind you, look, you need a separate form for this. You can press allow product, which means that that drug for that patient, it will no longer pop up for you. But for this example, I'm just going to say cancel. And if I did then realize, you know what, I probably did dispense Viagra, I'm just going to delete this prescription. You have a delete key at the bottom here, which deletes the item. The small drop down arrow here next to the delete key deletes the entire script. And you'll see the button is hidden here. And there we go, that's gone. Other pop-ups you'll see, other than the PCRS circular rules, which again are built into the background. So if you break any of those rules, like for example, if there's drugs that are not allowed under GMS, we will warn you and say you cannot dispense this under GMS. And then it'll switch it to drug refund automatically. Also, you'll notice for my Humira, I'm under drug refund at the moment, but if I put in Humira, the scheme will automatically switch to high tech. So it does things like that for you just to make your life easier. The other pop-ups you will see are your LTI pop-ups because the LTI core lists are also built into the system. All we require from you is if the patient is an LTI patient, we require that you put what condition they have so that we can then match the correct rules against the dispensing. So for example, if they were type 2 diabetes, but you had type 1, and then you dispensed a prescription that was primarily type 2, we will tell you, look, all of these drugs are actually allowed under this. Have you put in the wrong condition? And we will pop up with those. And how you assign an LTI condition is in that patient maintenance button, that edit F3, where all the details are, we have a medical tab right above details. And if you notice here, I have assigned diabetes this patient as their LTI condition, but it's down here in the bottom, and you can assign multiple if you need to. So I could put in anything else, epilepsy along with it if I need to, and it'll automatically put the code in. So code H, you don't need to remember them. So that now means that as I dispense to that patient, the system isn't going to tell me, is this allowed, because it knows. Whereas if you dispense something that isn't allowed, it will pop up just like that claim defender warning and tell you, look, this is not allowed under this LTI condition, and it'll change. So it's just to make your life a lot easier. That is the bulk of the dispense training. Now we'll look at the questions. There are a couple of other types of dispenses. Now I'll just see, maybe there is a question here asking about a few. We got 4, okay. Oh. You do multiple labels. Okay, perfect. So if I go back. So if you want to do batch labels, or if it's a patient, for example, who is not registered for phasing, but you're blistering just because, let's use this. I'll use this warfarin, for example. So multiple labels, you can, if you do need multiple labels, you can just press label, 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 but that's going to give me 4 labels of 100, which I'm going to assume from the question that that's not what you want. So let's say I want to do split labels. So what we do in that case is there's a small drop down arrow here beside the next key. And that allows you to split the labels with this button. So, and for my people on Helix, it's the exact opposite. I think Helix is 1 in 100, we're 101. So if you wanted, let's say, 4 labels of 25, I just do 25 by 4, and there you go. Or if it was you're giving out bottles and it's mils, you can do the same thing as well. You can split them up. If you had 250 ml bottles instead of a 500 of Gaviscon or something, you can do it that way as well. Saying OK then prints the labels for you. While we're on the topic of that, 1 second now. Okay. So now, so The splitting labels is this button here, but as I mentioned before, there are shortcuts for everything. And if I don't expect you to remember all of the shortcuts, there is quite a lot of them. And you'll hear me say the Alt key time and time again, because anything with a line underneath it means that Alt in that letter does that function. But if I hold the Alt key down, it'll actually show me, if I click in, there we go, what all of the Alt short keys are. So I don't expect you to remember them. If you're holding the Alt key down, the system assumes that you're looking around on the screen. You've no idea where the next key is, so it pops up with this. So for that question around the labels, you'll see this free type label, Alt and Y. So rather than having to go click, click, click and get that up, if I press Alt and Y, it just pops up a bit quicker. And there you go. So if you were doing multiple items, you can just go next, Alt Y, next, Alt Y, next, Alt Y. And it just makes it a bit quicker. I'll just have another look at the questions. Okay, let me minimize this. Is TouchStore compatible? Oh, wait, I'm after jumping down. Okay. Yes, everything today will be recorded. I think we're probably past 12 o'clock. I don't know if that person is still on. Okay. Can you forward date an RX? You can, of course. I'll show you that. You can either forward date one item or you can forward date the entire prescription. It's really up to yourself. Again, I'll use this warfarin as an example. Let's say I dispensed it and then realized, oh, I need to forward date that. If I edit that, we have a select all button here in the bottom left, which if you had a 10, 20 item script, rather than you having to go, oh God, I have to put that all on, I have to put it all on emergency supply, or I have to mark it all as not dispensed, or I need to forward date everything. The last thing you want to do is have to go through every single item. So what we have is select all, and it allows you to change all of these items around everything in the prescription. So for forward dating, if I put the dispense date, for example, into next month and say OK, you will notice that in the top right, the form date has automatically changed as well. So you don't need to worry about, if I change the dispense date, is it going to be claimed for in the right month? It'll automatically do it for you. But if, let's say for some reason it didn't, if I go select all again, you have form date right underneath it, and all it looks for is what month are you claiming for. But because it changed already, we won't need to do that. So again, how do I forward date? Select all, change the dispense date to what you need it to be. And it'll also, because when you're looking at the patient's file then, you're only going to see the original dispense or the forward dated date, so you've no idea that it's forward dated. So what we do is we give you notes here, which will appear in the bottom right of the screen to let you know when the script was originally dispensed. So it was originally dispensed on this date at this time. And that'll appear, and I'll actually complete that so you can see that. Also, for people on MPS, in TouchStore, you do not need to dispense, let's say if you have a GMS prescription and there's drug refund items on it, or items that aren't covered, or if it's DPS and LTI, you do not need to dispense the GMS, complete the prescription, come out, go back in, dispense the DR. You can lump them all into the one prescription and it'll sort the form numbers for you, so that it knows what items are covered and what aren't because of the PCRS circular rules that are built into the background. Okay, and you can also merge prescriptions as well, which I may go through. So if you see here, this was the warfarin, which I forward dated, which you can now see is March. And in the bottom right, we can see that original dispense date. And there's a tick here under notes to let us know that that is there. So I hope that answers that. Have another look. So if I process a long script under DR and it should be under LTI, can I amend with one edit? You can, of course. And it was using the same functionality there that I had for forward dating. So if I edit, select all of the items, which select all in the bottom left, and scheme, which will allow you to change the scheme from your current, which would be DR, to LTI. And then provided that you have the correct condition against it and those drugs are allowed, we will switch as many as are allowed under LTI to LTI. Anything that isn't, we'll leave it the scheme it's at, but we will warn you to let you know what we're doing. And you can then either change it yourself or so on. And again, that was just edit the script that you've already put through, select all to highlight everything, and then change the scheme. And let me jump back here. Oh, okay. How do you forward it? We're going through that. Is TouchStore compatible with TouchStore packing robots? It is indeed. The two pieces of software, if you're using a TouchStore at the moment, are Maple and Oak. So TouchStore just sends the dispensing information to the TouchStore, and then Maple and Oak handle it like it normally would, like all the other softwares. I think Maple handles the stock, or Oak handles the stock, and then Maple is just letting you know if the file is gone or not. But yes, they work with. We work with at the moment it's Consys, Tasho, nearly sure HD Medi, and then soon to be Gallman and DB Roa. How do I send orders? So I hadn't had orders added to this because it is a back office function. But I'll just show you how you can add items to the order from the dispensary screen. If there is interest in getting a call to cover orders, maintaining products, running an IPU file, or doing a claim, definitely let us know, let Clarity know, and then I can schedule a call to go through all of that side of thing. The claiming itself, because as you've seen on the screen with all these claim defender pop-ups with the PCR circulars, with your LTI core lists, you're not able to do duplicate dispenses on our system. It'll stop you dead in your tracks. Because that is the case, the claim training actually only takes about 10 or 15 minutes because you're technically verifying as you're dispensing, because it's very hard to make mistakes. So when it comes to the claim, there's very little verifying to do. But if you do need a training session on that, definitely let me know. But for your orders, as you're dispensing throughout the day, depending on what type of ordering you're on, whether it's pack replacement or reorder levels, but for this example, I'll just say you're on pack replacement, anything you dispense goes to a wants list to your selected provider. So whether that is UD, Axiom, Unifier, whoever, and that builds up throughout the day. If you wanted to manually add something to the order, we do have a quick key for that, and it is F7. And that then allows me to add a product to the order. I put in Morphin, select that product, and you'll see here how many I'm ordering. So I want to put one on the order to my United Drug daily order list, and it'll let you know when it was last dispensed and if you need to. Then adding to order just adds it there. That actually brings me onto a good topic, your quick keys at the top. So they do differ between different software providers, but just to explain the main ones, if you wanted to look up a price, for example, if you press F11 on the keyboard, that is our price lookup screen. If you see here, that's after popping up. So I'll use my Warfarin as another example. I pick the drug that I want to find out the price of. We'll then go down to the quantities here, which is to price. So if I'm 100 is one pack, so it's going to price that for me. You can adjust that if you need to, if you want to find out 2 packs. The prices here in the middle are your OTC pricing because we don't have a dispense fee included in here. So you'll know that for a 50% markup on this, you'd be looking at 546. Whereas for a dispensing fee, you'd be looking at 964 because it does include that €6 fee that I have in there for my scheme. If somebody at the till is querying you saying, I want to know how much my entire prescription is, I don't want to know just how much that item is, you don't have to dispense the script to find out. I search for the item, which I've done here, my Warfarin. It said it's 964 for that. I can then press next. And if you notice in the bottom left, we keep a running total. So you can now just keep entering the items that are on the prescription, and at the end it'll tell you how much the total script will cost in the bottom left. So you don't have to dispense it, then they say they don't want it and delete it. You can just go into F11, put in the drugs, and away it goes. And that was on your quick keys. So I'll just have a quick look at the questions again. Okay. How to create a new register for a new GP? I'll show you that. So creating a new GP. So there's a few ways of doing it, but the quickest way is if you see the doctor option here at the top, there is a cog next to that. And clicking on that will bring up your maintaining professionals or your doctor, your GP screen. And all you have to do here is press insert. Now, when creating a doctor on TouchStore, the one thing I recommend to everybody when you're creating them is this box here, your local box. Tick this for any doctor you create, because if you're creating a Dr. O'Brien and you're in Dublin and there's a Dr. O'Brien in Cork, you don't want to see that Dr. O'Brien in Cork. You only want to see your local doctor. So ticking this will have your local doctors take priority over any of the others. So if it's geographically, I would always recommend ticking this. The information then we require is just the name, address, the GMS code of the doctor if they're dispensing practice, and that's it. If they're a stock order doctor as well, you can adjust your Rx type, but I won't go into that just now. Pressing OK then will create the doctor, but if there is any information missing that we require, then you will have to, it'll warn you as you press OK to enter, and that'll create it. You can also merge doctors in here, just like patients. If you've noticed that people are creating multiples, you can press merge, and you'll always be merging the incorrect doctor into the correct doctor. So hope that answers that. So another quick look. Can you change the brand dispense without deleting the item? You can, of course. So that question is, I don't know if you can see the questions, but it just says, can I change the brand of an item without having to delete the drug? You can. So let's say, for example, with this warfarin, if I wanted to change it, I can just, probably a bad example, but look, I'll use that drug. The theory is still the same. So if I edit that drug, you have a change drug button at the bottom here. And what that does is it just brings up a new screen for you to search for. So I go warfarin, I'll go with a 3 milligram. I know now it's not a different brand, but a different strength. And I'll select that instead of my 1 milligram. It's just letting me know it's linked there. I could go with a Tiva brand if I wanted. And there we go. It's after changing to 3 milligram. And it uses all of the details you had for the 1 milligram, so you don't have to re-enter them if you've made the mistake. And then I can just recomplete, meaning that I have made changes, I'm not completing, I am recompleting the prescription. And you'll now notice 3 milligram, and it's remembered all of the details we had before for the 1 milligram. So I hope that answers that. Okay. Claim training would be helpful. Perfect. Yeah, again, just with the claim training, it honestly will take about 15 minutes, because as you're dispensing, because the system is popping up rules the whole time, it is warning you like, look, this item isn't allowed, or this GP, you can't dispense this to this GP. They're marked as a hospital GP. And your high-tech patient care fees is handled differently as well. It tries to take that kind of guesswork away from you. The thing that we get feedback on a lot is you can tell the system was designed by a pharmacist who just wanted to make his life easier, and that's how it is. So a lot of the stuff that can be automated for you is automated, like the PCRS circulars and the LTI core list, all built in. And there's no extra charge for those as well, by the way. They're all built into the system. Daily audit, yep, no bother. I'll actually report as a good one. So in the top right here, you have a modules section. Now, this is where all your, someone who asked me earlier about how do I send an order, that'll be in here. Now, because of the way the system is set up, our ordering is cloud-based, because it's just a lot quicker to get a response back from the supplier. It takes seconds rather than minutes. So if you send an order to the supplier, they can send back information straight away. So product maintenance, if I needed to make any adjustments to products, let's say pricing, your claims, and then reports. So the person asked, how do I run the daily audit? We name it a little differently. It's called your daily prescription report, which is technically the daily audit, and it's the first one here. And once I click on that, if it loads for me, you'll have your information here for what date you need to run it on, what schemes you require. The required are only the ones that are required for inspection, and then all would be everything. If you're ever getting a PSI inspection, they require everything, you can do that, but required is always what you need. And then print down here in the bottom will print that for you. For people coming from Helix, daily scheme statistics is actually your profit inquiry, the same thing, it's just how each scheme is doing and how many items you have per month. You have a controlled drug report. Patient analysis, again, from the people coming from Helix, it's the very same as your dispensed drug report. If a GP is looking for a line items that isn't a Med 1, you could run a patient analysis report. Vaccine reports, which does include, you don't need to do anything special for this report to populate with the nasal sprays for kids or for your quadrivalent. It automatically pulls them in as soon as you dispense them if you need to see how many vaccines you're doing. Product analysis, again, just requires you to enter in a product and it shows you how well it's doing and who's on it. Loans by prescriber. If you are somebody who sends prescription requests to a GP, if you run this report and you leave it blank, when it asks for a prescriber, it prints out every loan and you can actually set it to print prescriber per page. So you can have all of your loans that are due with each prescriber split up into pages and send them off to the GP. Whether they reply or not now is not, yeah. But your patient care fee report then is for your high-tech, not dispensed care fees. All you do there is you pick what month. Now I'll see, do I have any? I don't. Let me try March. I don't, okay. So what this report shows you is it splits it up into 3 sections for your patient care fees. The first section is people you are getting the full 60/52 for, so they are dispensed this month. Then you have people who are within the continuation period, so they are within that 3 months, you're still getting your €30 fee. And then you have people who have just fallen outside of it. And that's what the report will split it up for you. And it will show you the patient, the form number, the drug, and then when they were dispensed last. Then you have your Med 1. And then if you're unsure about the dosage codes and you find you're constantly creating them, you can print out a list of what they are. And they're your main pharmacy KPI reports. So that question earlier about the daily audit is your daily prescription report there in the top. And how I got there was modules and reports. Let me just have a look and see. Hope that answers that. Price inquiry, that's your F11 key that I would have went through earlier. But if you did need to see the price as the point of dispensing, or you need a breakdown of it, if I look at the prescription here, you'll see the total cost and the cost price of the drug. But if you needed to see a breakdown, there's a price tab here on the right hand side, and it just shows you how it got to that price. So if I was seeing it costs $11.92, but it's $5.92, but it's $11.92 total, you can see if you had a markup and a dispense fee against it. If it's something like somebody's arriving in and they're getting 6 months of the or 3 months of the pill, and you want to double charge, you can do that by just typing in an additional dispense fee in here if they're getting a couple of months in one go, so that you're not losing out on that dispense fee. And you'll see here now it's jumped to $17.92. Also, if you adjust prices for patients, or if you round down or round up for regular patients, the system will remember the price next month. So if you repeat the prescription you've adjusted the price for, the system knows next month, okay, this is the price. The one thing to watch out for though is in these cases, if she decides next month that doesn't want it again, just keep an eye on the pricing. But that's here and then also in the price tab. But if you needed to check the price of a drug, it's that F11 key, which is your price inquiry. Usually when we arrive on site, anyone that will be using TouchStore, and TouchStore is getting more common now, it's 1 in 4 chance of walking into a pharmacy and it having TouchStore. So we do tape these keyboard strips to the top of the keyboard, which tell you what all of your F keys are, because again, don't expect you to remember them. So they'll let you know what they all are. Okay, and then, oh, wrong screen. Okay. Again, record a copy of the training. I'm sure Clarity will be able to follow up with you on that. Can you search a product by GMS number? You can indeed. So put through. I'll see if my system now, hopefully my system is set up for it. Do I know the GMS number of, I'm just going to type out a random one. No, it's not set up for it, but yes, you can. My demo laptop is slayed because I have function keys on here. It's acting quite strange. But let's see. You can, and just to cover both topics of that, if it's the point of dispensing or if it's on the back office. On the back office, you can search by anything as well for the product to bring it up if you need to make adjustments to it. Let me have a look here and see. Where is the next? Thanks. Okay. How do you add an item to a previously dispensed script so that they have the same claim number? Perfect. So I'll show you two ways of doing that. If you needed to merge an item that has already been dispensed, so let's say I wanted this Viagra in with this warfarin, you just need to edit the script that you want to keep the form number for, and then you repeat the item into it. Whereas if I wanted to add an item to this, I just edit the prescription, the one that I want to add the form number to, or this form number that I want to keep. So here's my 02. I edit that, and then you have an insert button down here underneath the next. That'll allow you to just enter in a brand new item, and it'll include it in the form number here. The only time we will split the forms is if there's a different GMS doctor, different dispense dates, different schemes, or if you genuinely change it yourself. But so for example, if I put in my 1 milligram and I change the doctor, Thornton, you'll now notice in pink, oh, I didn't change it. Go back. If I change this to 61559, next. Ah, why is it? Yeah, it's changing it for both of them. So you can change it individually. I don't know why it's not letting me, but so your previous question was, can I add items in? So yes, these would then be under the form number, but if it's something from the history you want to merge in, we have a button here called PMR, which allows you to jump back to the patient medication record. You see here, and it leaves the dispense we're working on at the moment in a current dispense state. So it's still open. And then I can just select what I want. So if I want the Viagra to be merged in here, probably a bad example because it's going to give out about the rule. So if I wanted this, for example, I just repeat, just warning you that the dates don't match. So if I say yes to this, it's gone in. Now you'll notice here, it's just saying the RX dates don't match. That's not, you can change that so that it will give you the same form, but also the scheme is different, and it highlights anything that's different in pink, meaning that this is why you're going to get a different form, because these are different. So then you can just adjust the schemes to match, and then you'll get the same form for both. And again, how I did that was I pressed PMR, which jumped back to the history, and then I just repeated the item in. Now just remember, you will have to remove the duplicate that you've repeated if you've merged. So if you've merged the items, just remember to delete the previous script you merged from, because it will not delete it when you repeat from it. Okay. Another handy way of doing this actually is if you don't want to press the PMR button and jump back out, if it's just one item and the history isn't too heavy, you'll see here it says press Alt plus H to show the patient history. So if I do Alt and H on my keyboard, there's the patient's history right on the screen in front of me. And you can repeat from here as well. It's just if if it's a 10 item script and there's a lot of history, it can get a little messy. So that's why we give you the PMR option here. Just going to remove that script. Okay, and I'll just check now. Okay, deleted a drug, just went through that there. Can you see a list of owings? Yes, there is an owed items report that we add, and it'll show you a full list of the owings outstanding. And we usually run that the first day we're on site with you, just to double check. We do have a section as well called My Day, which is like your personal calendar. It's like a personal planner. So I went into modules there and My Day. Now I don't have it set up properly on this, but I'll just show you. So for example, if you see I have an owing dispense there, and you'll see you have prescriptions due. So if you had a date in and you have a patient marked as a regular patient, it'll actually tell you who's due in and what date they're due in. And you can actually click, and I'll show you here. So my owed dispenses, for example, there's Joe White. I owe him 28 atorvastatin that date. If I press the person icon, now he's already open in the background, but it'll jump to that patient's file. And you'll see we have things for loans as well. So TouchStore Test, there's an item that's loaned to them. So that's one way of tracking, but there is a report also if you prefer a printed version. But again, how to get here was modules and My Day. And then you can see your owed dispenses there. And the patient icon here will jump to the patient that you're querying. So you don't have to come back out, type out their name and so on. And you can start marking them off. It's handy for repeats as well. If you saw those repeats I added in earlier, it'll show you who's due for repeats and any phase prescriptions due. Now the reason why it's not showing me any phase is because I completed 4 of 4 there. and we're nowhere near the 28 days yet. So, but if I adjusted the dates, I would do it there. Okay, that's again modules and My Day, fairly handy if you're not a fan of running reports and you just want the copy in front of you. My Day is good for that. Thank you very much. Good to get feedback. Yeah, again, you'll notice the system is very pharmacist focused because it was designed by a pharmacist. So things that used to annoy him, he made sure that they were fixed. So how can we make note of the daily audit when we issue emergency supply? PSI looks for it on the audit. Yep, no bother. So when you're entering an emergency supply in our system, it will ask for a reason as to why it is, and that reason will appear on the daily audit. But there was for a while, now I don't know if they're as kind of drilled in on it now, but they did want for a while that if you did go with emergency supply, they wanted to know where the original script was, so what pharmacy it was in. So for those, we had to add a button. So if I go orphan, for example, oh, let's see, what schemes do I have set up? Okay, so you'll notice that that's after changing from on loan to emergency supply. The reason why is because when we arrive to site, we go through with the pharmacist what way they want the system set up. So on loan for your claimable schemes and emergency supply for your non-claimable. The reason why is because emergency supply will give you a form number straight away because it assumes you're never going to get a prescription, whereas on loan will not give you a form number because it assumes you're claiming for the item, we need a script. The main difference is if I tick on loan, highlights the item in yellow, I do not get a form number. Emergency supply, if I tick it, asks for a reason. The reasons are usually pre-populated. Again, like your dosage codes, if you need a new reason, just double click in there and you can add as many as you like. These reasons will appear on the daily audit, but if you do need to add your own personal line to the daily audit, like let's say where the original script is, we have a PSI info button here. And if you click on that, it'll allow you to add a line to the one dispense that you're doing, to one drug, or for the entire prescription. And you just type away there and that line appears under the dispense on the daily audit. Just actually while I'm on the topic of notes, I know you have the patient note here on the top right and the drug notes here as well, but you can attach a prescription note if you need to as well in the bottom left, and that'll be attached to the script. So I hope that answers that. So your emergency supply reason will appear, but if you need an additional line, you have that PSI info button. Where allergy is recorded, perfect. So allergies are in, if you noticed earlier when I was in the patient's details, so my maintenance screen, which is your edit here, you have your medical tab, and you have allergies and contractional conditions, and you can add them in here. Okay, you can also put, wrong button. You can put in details in here. Usually when you switch over, we would go through this with you on day one. A lot of these, because if you notice there's a lot of tabs at the top here, we don't usually cover them on like calls like this because it's down a rabbit hole. The one thing I will show you though is other than the medical tab and your conditions, with the families, we do link families based off the card numbers, provided they're similar. But if you have people that are newly married and they're not linked, we have a family tab here, which will allow you to link them manually. All you do is make one person the head of family, and the system then will show you who has similar card numbers or who has the same surname. And then you can just pick the ones that you want to link. So if they're newly married and you want them to contribute to the same DPS cutoff or GMS cutoff, that's all you need to do. And actually, while we're on the topic of GMS and DPS cutoffs, I'll just show you. We do have a GMS and DPS analysis button, which if you're getting a non-chargeable label or you hand drugs to a patient and they are querying saying, I've already paid 114, why am I getting a label? If you press F5 on your keyboard, it'll show you how many payments they've made, how many prescriptions you've charged them for, and how much is remaining. So because I unfortunately haven't marked them as paid here, it says the amount due, they owe me €3 and they haven't paid me yet. So I can assume that these drugs are still on the shelf and they haven't come in and collected them yet. So if I reprint a bag label for this patient, it's going to say they owe me €3 until I do otherwise. If you have our tills, If you scan this bag label at the till, it automatically marks it as paid, so there is no question whether they paid for it or not. If it's not marked as paid, it's still on the shelf, they haven't collected it. As soon as you hit the cutoff, then your labels will be non-chargeable. And this is just the GMS one, but the DPS one is a little more detailed because we show you the FEMPI family total as well. I don't have DPS in this patient, but we show you the FEMPI, what the PCRS considered the cutoff to be, and then what the system actually is considering the cutoff to be. Okay, let's just have another look here. No bother at all. One thing I know it's probably more of a nice to have, and you probably won't get them often, but extemporaneous items, it's just they're very easy in this to do, and I know that they're an absolute heartache in the other ones. So if I do a new dispense, we have an extemp button here in the bottom left, or bottom down here. If I click on that, we put in the type of extemporaneous item we're doing. So for this example, I'll go with BMX. You have your different options here. You also then have more detailed. So the reason why we give you the different options is because the fee will change drastically depending on what you pick. For drug refund, you will have a lot more options, but because my scheme here in the background is GMS, it's not going to matter too much. Drug refund, you would have, like let's say BMX would be 100 mil between 200 mil, 200 mil between 300 mil, and 300 and above, and that kind of thing, and so on. And the fees will change drastically depending. I'll actually, you know what, I'll put it under drug refund so we can see the more detail. So if I do extemp, you'll now see a lot more options. And the reason why is because if I go 300 mil, the price nearly jumps by another 10 euro. And these are all pulled as well for you. So let's say we'll go with our first, and you'll have to bear with me because I am not a pharmacist by any means. So if I can remember the ratios for this, I know for BMX it's Benylin, and I'm going to put in my quantity of 110. You can put in your batch and expiry here. The reason why we look for it now is because when you go to repeat this extemp next month, the only thing we look for is the batch and expiry. We remember everything else. So you won't have to re-enter quantities, you won't have to re-enter drugs or anything, just a new batch and expiry. Finland, Malox, if I spell it right, it might help. Oh my God. Malox, we'll go with this one, sure, for the example. Now my next ingredient, and all I'm doing here is once I'm happy with that one, I'm just clicking up here into the search bar to go with my next ingredient. Now let's say for lidocaine, I don't want to type out the whole thing of lidocaine. There's my wildcard after popping up again. 2%, and is there an ampule there? We'll go with this 20 ampule just for the example, and I'll change that to 2. So now you'll see we've taken the extemp fee. We've taken all your ingredients costs, which have been reduced by the reducing of the quantity. And there's your total cost, 29.89. As soon as I say OK, there's my interaction, because God knows what else I have them on. So there, it's after shortening the name of the product so that the PCRS are happy, because if a few of you have been in pharmacies for a while, you'll probably remember the time that the BMX mouthwash changed. When you changed the name of BMX to BMX mouthwash, it was being rejected because the ingredients were not in the product name. So this actually prevents that from happening. So the PCRS are happy. And then the dispense quantity is 1 because it's 1 extemp. You'll also notice that in the bottom right for the GMS number, it automatically puts in the correct one depending on what type of extemp we're doing. So you don't need to worry about that. As soon as I complete that, then that's it. The extemp is done. You can then repeat from it next month. All that it asks you for is that pop-up screen comes up and it says what is the batch and expiry. And that is it. So just to show you that, because I know that when people hear extemps, I know we probably won't get one for another 6 months, and it'll probably be bet innovate. But it's the same logic. Okay. Perfect. Yeah, I think I covered everything. If I missed any questions, I apologize, but that is the gist of it. The main thing today is to just get you so that if you do arrive into a pharmacy, now that it's getting a lot more common, that you will land in a pharmacy that is using RX, TouchStore Rx, that at least you won't be stuck. Actually, another question just came in there. Are there shortcuts for vet RX? Assuming veterinary, The only difference between veterinary and regular patients is you mark them yourself. That we still consider them regular patients because the daily audit and reports are all the same. We mark them as a veterinary file in here so that when you're searching, you can single them out if you want. There's a filter here and you can search by vet patients, which just makes it a bit easier for you to run reports, interrogate their data, and so on. There is different labels as well that we can adjust for veterinary patients because they do require a little more information. I'm nearly sure the GP has to be on the label. But it's created the exact same way. The only difference is vet. And the veterinary drugs are within the IPU product file, so it's the same product file. And actually, that brings me on to one thing while we're on the topic of labels. If you need to batch label or create your own labels, there's an F4 key for that. And you can add whatever you need, whether it's penicillin warnings and you stick them on the bag. You can do that by pressing F4. Perfect. Okay. Just because will TouchStore available in Touch? It is. It's 100% compatible with touchscreens. So if you do have all-in-one units, it will work with the all-in-one units as well. We just change how we train you then, because usually we push the keyboard and mouse, but if you have a touchscreen, it's perfectly fine. And also as well, you can run 2 TouchStores at the same time. So if you're in the middle of dispensing somebody, you don't have to complete the prescription to then go and query somebody else's file. You can just open a second instance. The one thing that I would recommend is that you close out of it when you're done, because if our system will not let you open the same patient's file twice, especially around because health mail being in and printing out 6 or 7 prescriptions, it just stops people from double dispensing. So we lock the patient. But you can have 2 running at the same time, which some people do now with health mail. If they have 2 screens, they'll have a dispensing screen open and there's a query patient screen on the other side along with health mail. They'll run concurrently with each other. Okay, and I think that's what happens if you forget to recomplete a script. Will the system prompt you? It will indeed. If you forget to complete a prescription, it stays in a current dispense state. When you go to close the application in the evening, it pops up and says, these are the patients that you have forgotten about. And it gives you a list of the patients and what the scripts are. So then you can go back and complete them.